There you are. Oh, I thought we'd have to do the show without you, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting will be a thrill. Grandpa and chill, grandson and friends. Podcasting Grandpa and chill will be a thrill, grandson and friends. With your hosts, Grandpa Barton, Brandon Fox, Phines Jackson, and Sierra Dawes. This is Grandpa and Chill.
Can I just erase all these recordings?
I think about that all the time.
Does he have a bunch of recordings?
Grandpa, you get to introduce the show today. You want to?
No.
Well, here you go. And a 5, 6, 7, 8. Grandpa.
I'm going to do it because he has to come in here and we don't have time for this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Grandpa and Chill. We're taking a very long break, but we're back into business, baby. My sinuses are working. Phines' hat is working. Grandpa's technology is working. And Brandon's pasta is working. We're here with Dr. Philip, and his last name will be pronounced
Ovadia.
when he shows up. So we'll get that perfect full name when it comes. He's a heart surgeon, and he's going to tell us all about what we're doing wrong with our bodies and our diets and our practices. Bienvenue. Hello.
Hello, how you all doing?
Very good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Hello.
First question, what do we prefer that we call you?
You can call me Phil. Ovadia is how you pronounce my last name.
Ovadia.
Sort of a introduction, but calling me Phil is just great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Phil. We were all really excited for this episode. So
yes, excited to be here.
Why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and the book?
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Philip Ovadia. I am a cardiac surgeon, a heart surgeon by training. And over the past few years, I have, as I went through my own journey towards good health, come to realize the importance of metabolic health to preventing heart disease and many of the other chronic diseases that plague our society today and affect so many people. And along those lines, I have now become passionate about helping people to stay off my operating table. So I have a upcoming book. It's going to be released November 11th called Stay Off My Operating Table. And I look forward to discussing some of the concepts in there with everyone today and informing people and educating people on how they can stay off my operating table.
Sweet. Before we jump in, how you doing today? I know you probably have an extremely busy schedule, so.
Yeah, not too bad. I, kind of have a block of some podcast recordings here this evening and a couple of calls with patients yet to come up, but all in all, I'm doing great.
Yeah, where are you located?
So I am currently right now in Memphis, Tennessee. I actually live in Florida, but I end up traveling for my heart surgery work. So I'm currently up here in Memphis, Tennessee, helping at a hospital that was in need of heart surgery services.
Gotcha. Do you get a good amount of sleep, or is that?
Yes, I try to. And that doesn't necessarily equate on a time scale. One of the things I actually talk about it in the book is that I think more important than the amount of time that you spend sleeping is the quality of your sleep.
Yeah.
And I think focusing on metabolic health helps with that, and some other things that, making sure you sleep well as opposed to sleep more.
You use the term a lot in the book, metabolic health, and it's actually something I never, I think, directly heard before.
Right.
Yeah. What is the definition for listeners that might not know?
So, metabolic health most simply is defined as your body is taking the inputs that you're giving it, mostly in the form of food, but also, other things. But basically, it is using the inputs that you're giving it properly. So, when we eat, there are a couple of things that our body is supposed to do with that food. We're supposed to get the energy to, do everything we do throughout our day. fuel all of our activities. We're supposed to build and rebuild our tissues and realize that, most of the tissues in our body are constantly kind of turning over and recycling. And then we're supposed to store a little bit of energy so that if something were to come up and food wasn't available, as it oftentimes did in the past, but doesn't so much anymore, we're supposed to have a little bit of a buffer to help us get through that. When you are not metabolically healthy, which it turns out that the vast majority of people are not, your body isn't doing those things properly. And what commonly ends up happening is you're storing a whole lot of energy. This is what obesity is. But we're not able to use that energy. And quite frankly, we never give that opportunity for our bodies to use that energy because we're very rarely not, surrounded by food these days. So metabolic health in its simplest form is your body is properly using the inputs that you're giving it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and one of the things that I loved about the book, and so sorry, I jumped in without doing introductions. I'm Brandon. Got my amazing co-host here if they want to.
Hello, I'm Phines.
And I'm Grandpa.
Nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet y'all.
Yeah.
You were about to ask something, Brandon?
Oh, I just wanted to say something that I love about the book that is sort of inspiring is that it's based off of your own personal journey, right? Which I love because it comes off way less, I would say, clinical. You know what I mean? But...
Yeah, exactly. I tried to, my goal in writing this book was for, people to be able to get this information and understand it. I didn't go, deep into the science. It's not loaded with scientific references. And it really is based upon my experience and the experience of my patients.
Mm-hmm.
And it's everything that I have come to learn over the past, couple of years about the importance of staying healthy and how we have lost focus, as a healthcare system, as a society, we have lost focus on remaining healthy. We focus largely on how best can we treat unhealthy people. And we have forgotten how to be healthy. And we've forgotten, quite honestly, that you can be healthy. You look all around you and everyone around you is unhealthy. The statistics show that 88% of the adults in the United States are not metabolically healthy. So when everyone around you is unhealthy, you don't realize that you've become unhealthy as well. It's just normal. So we need to get back to focusing on that. We need to start paying attention to that because it turns out that, doing things that keep you metabolically healthy are the same things that are going to reduce your risk of getting, most of the chronic diseases that affect us these days, things like heart disease, things like diabetes, things like Alzheimer's, many forms of cancer are related to metabolic health. So, rather than continuing to operate, continuing to do heart surgery on all these people, which I still do, I would much rather teach people how not to get to that point that they need a heart operation.
Okay, cool. I have a question and a cool comment about so you were saying something about metabolic irregularities between people, right? And that seems like it's very individually, like it's everyone's different. So to be healthy, everyone's got to be individually different. Like what healthy is individually different for everyone. Right. And you said something in your book about that being a problem because we don't have enough physicians to be able to even give that time and effort. Because it seems like, for me to find out everyone's individual health and their what's right for them metabolically, it seems like it could be quite a task for a physician to handle if they're trying to figure out everything's right. I mean, I'm just agreeing with you with that whole chapter, that whole thing about like
right,
how it's so easy to give them medicine instead of that time to look into what's best for their lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out that assessing people's metabolic health is really not that difficult. They're pretty simple. There are actually 5 simple measurements that we look at to assess whether someone is metabolically healthy or not. And again, I go through these in the book. And if anyone goes to my website, ifixhearts.co, there is a metabolic health assessment tool right there that will march you through these. But, basically the 5 measurements that you want to look at are your waist circumference. So you take a tape measure just above the level of your belly button, and you see what your waist circumference is. If you're a male, you want that measurement to be less than 40 inches. If you're female, you want it to be less than 35 inches. You look at your blood pressure next. And again, common measurement. You can go to any drugstore, any supermarket these days, put your arm in the machine and get it, or your doctor can take it, or you can order a blood pressure cuff to have at home and check it. And you want your blood pressure to be less than 130/85. And you want that to be without requiring any medications. If you require medications to lower your blood pressure, that's a sign that you're not metabolically healthy. And then you have to get some blood work done. But this is basic blood work that every physician checks essentially these days. And you're going to look at your fasting blood glucose level, the amount of sugar that is in your blood when you haven't eaten for 8 to 12 hours. And the number you're looking for is under 100 for that. And again, that's without medications. So if you've already been diagnosed as being type 2 diabetic, you are not metabolically healthy by that measurement. And then you're going to look at your cholesterol numbers. And we all, everyone looks at their cholesterol numbers. Everyone has these checked. But the problem is that there are 3 numbers on the cholesterol measurement. On a standard cholesterol panel is going to have 3 measurements: the LDL, what's called the bad cholesterol, the HDL, called the good cholesterol, and the triglycerides. And most doctors only focus on the LDL cholesterol. But for metabolic health, the LDL cholesterol doesn't factor in at all. It's those other 2 measurements, the HDL cholesterol and the triglycerides. And you want your HDL cholesterol, if you're the higher the better, that's your good cholesterol. So if you're female, you want it to be over 50. If you're male, you want it to be over 40. And then your triglycerides, you want to be less than 150. And so those 5 simple measurements are going to tell you whether or not you're metabolically healthy. And if you have 3 of those that are not within the healthy range, you have what we call metabolic syndrome, which means you're at very high risk of developing things like diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, and other chronic diseases. If you have 1 or 2 of those things abnormal, that's a warning sign that you're on your way to metabolic syndrome. And if you don't know those measurements, I consider that to be another warning sign, because that means you're not paying attention to your health like you should.
All right.
In the book, you say that high cholesterol causing heart disease is a myth. Can you elaborate on that more?
Yeah. So, we have been led to believe for a number of reasons that the singular cause of heart disease is high cholesterol, and specifically high LDL cholesterol. As I said before, that's the one number that when you get your cholesterol checked at your doctor's, that's the number they tend to focus on. The reality is that the relationship between high cholesterol and developing heart disease is fairly weak. There is some correlation, but it's not that big a correlation. More important, when you look at the data, is metabolic health. So just to put some numbers to it, someone with an elevated LDL cholesterol in and of itself, compared to someone who doesn't have an elevated LDL cholesterol, has about a 1.4, 1.5 times, the risk of developing heart disease. Someone with poor metabolic health, so 3 or 5 of those measures, or there's another measurement we look at called insulin resistance. but having poor metabolic health puts you at about a 6 to 8 times the risk of heart disease. So 5 times more risk associated with poor metabolic health than associated with that LDL cholesterol number. Now, the reason that we focus so much on the LDL cholesterol, quite honestly, is because we have medications that will lower LDL cholesterol. And it's easy on sort of a large population level to say, okay, people have high LDL cholesterol. We give them a medicine to lower their LDL cholesterol. We lower their risk of heart disease a little bit, it turns out. It's not a great, effect from that, but it does do a little bit. We don't have an easy way to improve metabolic health with a pill. I go through in my book how you improve metabolic health. It mostly has to do with the types of food that you choose to eat. But again, that's not something real easy that, you can't make a real quick checkbox, and the physician can't, in the 15-minute visit that they typically have with you. It's a lot easier to just look at the cholesterol, say it's high, give you the medication, and off you go. But it gives us a false sense of security. People think that, okay, I'm taking my medication, I'm lowering my cholesterol, I'm now going to have a real low risk of ever getting heart disease. And the data just doesn't show that. I end up operating on a lot of patients who have a normal cholesterol level. Some of them because they're on the medication, some of them just naturally, they have a low cholesterol level, and they still end up on my table for, heart surgery. I do not end up operating on patients who have good metabolic health for the most part.
You talk a lot about processed food and the amount of processed food we eat, and like tips and tricks to kind of avoid running into processed food. But I don't think some people realize how much of our food is actually processed.
Yeah, it really is eye-opening when you look at it. One of the sort of simple sort of visual tricks that I'll use with my patients is, I'll kind of pull out the sort of map of a standard supermarket, and, you can basically put a big X through 90% of it,
wow.
Meaning that is all processed food.
Yeah.
If it comes in a bag, if it comes in a box, it is processed food. And what we need to get back to is eating whole, real food. So simply, I tell people you want to eat the things that grow in the ground, and you want to eat the things that are eating the things that grow in the ground, the animals and the animal products. Just stick to whole, real food. If we as humans, didn't eat it, prior to 100 or 150 years ago, we probably shouldn't be eating it. The foods that we ate for 99.99% of our existence as humans is probably what we need to be eating to keep us healthy.
One of the crazy things, or just crazy to me because there's so much conflicting, I don't know, just points in regards to nutrition that we're told, especially on YouTube and the way that a lot of young people consume entertainment, etc., is like calories in, calories out. I always thought was like the gold standard fact of health. Like if you want to lose weight, if you eat less than you exert, like scientifically, it's and you argue that a lot in the book. And to that point, I'm not sure if the data, like the peer-reviewed studies, are like this as far as nutrition, but like what content creators put out and what is available on the internet is just like so conflicting, right? You bring it up with Atkins, but like some people are like carbs are great, others say carbs are it's just so hard to sift through all of this and figure out what actually works.
Yeah. So, what we have to understand is that the calorie in, calorie out concept, comes out of the laboratory. Our bodies do not sense calories. There is absolutely zero function in our body that pays attention to calories. In the laboratory, we translate food to calories, but that's not what our bodies do. Our bodies pay attention to nutrition, They pay attention to the content of the food that we're eating in terms of the vitamins and the nutrients and the minerals and the amount of protein and carbohydrates and fats. And then our body works by responding to that with, hormones, basically. And they control, metabolic health, like I was talking about. They control whether energy gets stored or energy gets burned and what, goes to rebuilding and building our tissues. So that's the first thing I try and get people to understand, is that our body doesn't pay attention to calories. And so the calorie in, calorie out model is clearly failing. We have been pushing the calorie in, calorie out model for, 50 plus years. And you just look all around and our health continues to deteriorate. So to me, that's the best evidence that the calorie in, calorie out model doesn't work. Personally, I can tell you that I tried to use the calorie in, calorie out model to make myself healthy many times. And in the short term, yes, you can get yourself to eat, a little, you can get yourself to eat less calories. You can get yourself to exercise more and burn more calories, and you lose some weight in the short term, but that does not work over the long term. And my experience and the experience of, many of the people that are going to be in your audience and many of the people I work with is they go through that cycle where they do it for a little while, they lose a little bit of weight, and then they gain the weight back and more. And the whole diet industry, quite frankly, is built on people failing, because you have to realize that, Weight Watchers, NutriFast, all of these companies, they want you coming back again, and they know you're going to come back again. So over the long term, what you need to do is change the types of food you're eating with the focus on how those foods affect your body, how they affect your metabolic health. And ultimately, you have to find a way to get your body the nutrition it needs, nutrients it needs, without the excess of calories that comes with processed food.
But that kind of goes back into the question of who do you trust, or where do you get your information from when there's all these conflicting views? Because we were talking about, you also talk about early in the book about how, the food pyramid is, kind of bullshit, because it's it's 80 years old or 60 years old. And it says stuff like, you need 7 servings of bread a day.
Right.
It's what is that? That makes no sense. That's insane.
Yeah,
it's complicated. It's hard.
It is. And I think ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I think we all have the inner sense, that's telling us, are we healthy? Do we feel good? And is what we're doing serving our health? And we have to be honest with ourselves about that. And you're right, there is lots of conflicting information out there. And, everyone is not the same. And so, in my book, I don't give you the Dr. Ovadia 28-day plan. This is what you have to do to be healthy. Right. I lay out the principles that are going to support your metabolic health. And I actually go through a lot of the common diets today. Everything literally from vegan to carnivore, low carb, Atkins, Mediterranean, all of these popular diets. And I talk about what is metabolically healthy about them and what is not metabolically healthy about them. And I think if we can refocus our whole sort of, attention around the concept of being metabolically healthy, and then finding a way to eat that's going to support us being metabolically healthy, and doing the other habits in our life that are going to keep us metabolically healthy, that will help clarify, the confusing information that's out there.
Dr. Ovadia, 2 things. One is recently read an short article that nuts are very good for us. I'm being more specific about things. How do you feel about that? Things like cashews and other types of nuts.
Yeah, in general, I do think nuts are a healthy food for us to eat. Again, it's a whole, real food. It's a food we've been eating, for a large part of our existence. The only caution I give people around nuts is, again, you have to look at how those nuts are prepared. And many of the nuts that we buy in the supermarket have been roasted in these fake processed oils, the vegetable and seed oils. And that makes them not as healthy. If you can get raw nuts unroasted, or you can get them what's called dry roasted without the oils, I think that is a healthier way to consume them. And, ultimately, also you need to pay attention to, there are some nuts that might be better than others. So I tend to prefer things like walnuts and almonds and macadamia nuts over peanuts. But ultimately I think nuts are fine, and they are one of the whole real foods, that fits into a metabolically healthy diet.
The other question I have, you haven't hit on exercise.
Right.
I would think that exercise is a very important aspect of keeping yourself healthy.
Yeah. So it turns out, exercise is certainly a healthy habit to have, but it's not the primary thing that's going to keep you healthy or get you healthy if you're unhealthy. The common, saying that we've all heard lots of times, you can't out-exercise a bad diet, is very true. You can. So the mistake that I see a lot of people make is, we all know people who are very active, and because they're very active, they stay thin, or maybe they don't, but they're very active, and we think they're healthy, and they think they're healthy, and they're not paying attention to what they eat. And a lot of the foods that, people who are very active tend to eat turn out not to be very good for our health. And then, a couple of things can happen. They start getting less active as they get older, but they continue to eat those same things, and they end up very unhealthy, fairly quickly after that. We see lots of former high-level athletes ending up with heart trouble and other chronic diseases. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or just over time, that poor metabolic health, which has been brewing, but has been kind of, covered up by their high levels of activity, manifests itself. And, I end up operating on them. They get heart disease and I end up operating on them. So exercise is certainly a good activity to support your health, but it doesn't guarantee that you're healthy. And you still need to pay attention to these factors, and you need to make sure that you're remaining metabolically healthy, no matter how active you are. The other quick topic I'll touch on around exercise is you also have to pay attention to what type of exercise you're doing. And there's always a lot of debate between, cardio and weightlifting, cardio and resistance exercises. And I think the data shows that, resistance exercise, building and maintaining muscle as we get older, is probably more important than, the cardio. And if you have time to do both, great. I strongly endorse doing both if you can. But if your time is limited, your energy is better spent focused on the resistance exercise, building and maintaining muscle over the long run, than doing, long periods of cardio.
Phil, are you familiar with the term dirty bulking?
Yes, the kind of, the gym bros, they're often called. Yes.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on people that not run to sort of deplete the calories that they eat, but because they're lifting very heavily and gaining a lot of muscle, that they're aesthetically looking very good, right? But are still eating full pizzas and that kind of thing. And
again, over the long run, I'm not a big fan of it. Muscle is the most metabolically active tissue we have. So if you have a lot of muscle, you're going to be able to tolerate kind of more metabolically unhealthy foods before, it really becomes damaging. But, again, you have to pay attention to your habits, and are you going to be able to maintain that, kind of large level of muscle mass, as you get older. Ultimately, I don't think that that's the healthiest way, to be, but I understand, people want to do that. People, want to be competitive in that field. I think you can do it, in the short term, but over the long run, it's not going to be good for your metabolic health.
It does seem like a lot of weightlifters and athletes that lift have a lot of heart problems, and some die young, heart attacks. That kind of thing.
And some of that has to do with the steroids that might be prominent, especially in the past in that world. But a lot of it does have to do with the types of diets that go to support that. And the other thing I always point out to people is, because someone who is doing that, someone at an elite level of weightlifting, bodybuilding, is able to, stay healthy and get, kind of maintain that physique and everything, doesn't mean that same advice translates to, the rest of us who aren't like that. Those people are, the people that do that probably have somewhat unique genetics to be able to do that most of us don't have. And quite frankly, they're just putting in a lot more work than, most average people do. Regarding, muscle building and weightlifting. So, the way that they eat to support what they do is not going to translate to the way that, other people should be eating.
I meant it more so as a lot of not elite weightlifters will eat a pizza and be like, well, I'm bodybuilding and working out anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these are not the Olympians that I'm
Yeah. And I think, ultimately, like I said, if you're paying attention to your metabolic health, if you're measuring these metrics that I talked about, it's going to tell you, are you metabolically healthy or not? Another key thing to keep in mind is when you're younger, it's easier to be metabolically healthy, especially, when we're growing and when we're in our, early 20s and our 30s. A lot of the effects of poor metabolic health, are kind of cumulative over time. So you might be able to get away with things, when you're young. And a lot of the influencers, fall into that category. But again, that doesn't mean that that's what's going to be able to support you as you get older.
This topic is exactly what this podcast is about.
Break it now, Brandon.
Yeah.
Well,
end the cycle.
I was gonna say that you had a section in your book on aging specifically.
Yeah.
And Grandpa, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that it doesn't have to be a barometer at all of health. Even in your 90s, you can still be as healthy as you were. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think, one of the sad realities is that we have come to expect that as we get older, our health is going to deteriorate. And it has, been accepted as normal that, a 50-year-old should be on multiple medications. Again, the data shows that by the time most people in this country get to 50, they're on more than one medication to support their health. And I think, it doesn't need to be that way. I know it doesn't need to be that way. I routinely work with people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond who, get metabolically healthy and get off of most or all of the medications that they were previously on, or, have paid attention to metabolic health throughout their life and are able to avoid getting on those medications in the first place. I don't think it's normal that, as you get older, you shouldn't be able to continue to live, a fulfilled life because you're constantly in pain or you just don't have any energy. When you look at ancestral populations, for instance, when you look at the populations that don't have the influence that we have of the modern food supply, largely those people are healthy pretty much up until the day they die. And then they die, and there's no reason that we can't do the same. I think if you focus on metabolic health throughout your lifetime, or you start focusing on metabolic health no matter what age you're at, you can always improve things. And then you can always, prevent these things that tend to cripple us throughout much of our life. When you talk to people don't want to live longer if they're going to be unhealthy for much of their life. They want to be healthy longer. And that's what I think a focus on metabolic health can achieve.
How do you the words?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about sweeteners? Like sweeteners, substitute sweeteners. And
Yeah.
I've also kind of wondered like how people feel about like sugar versus like honey or like sort of more natural sweeteners too.
Right. Yeah, again, a little bit of a complex and controversial topic. We probably don't have the amount of data, the amount of science that we should have on this. Ultimately, I think the artificial sweeteners are processed food, and I'm not a big fan of incorporating them into your diet. I think they are a tool that can be used. If someone is consuming a lot of sugar and needs to kind of get themselves off that sugar, in the short term, the sugar substitutes might be, better for that. But, over the long run, these things are not benefiting our health. No one's ever really shown that Diet Coke is healthy for us. It might be a little bit better than regular Coke, but ultimately getting all of that, out of your food supply is going to be better. When it comes down to it, I think if, you are looking to, have something sweet, probably using, a natural sweetener such as honey is going to be better than an artificial sweetener. Now, I always caution people, this depends on where you are in your metabolic health journey. If you are metabolically unhealthy, any amount of sugar is going to be too much sugar for you, essentially. You want to get your sugar intake as low as possible. Right. But once you are metabolically healthy and, if you are very active and if you have more muscle, you're going to be able to tolerate, more sugar and carbohydrates in general. And my preference is to use, honey, real sugar in that situation as opposed to the, fake processed stuff.
Okay.
Dr. Ovadia, is bread, do you consider bread to be a processed food?
Yes, bread is clearly a processed food. There are some ways that you can make, healthy breads, things like, homemade sourdough bread that, is, can be consumed in limited amounts. But bread, as most of us, conceive it to be, what you get in the supermarket, what you get in restaurants, bread is a processed food. And, when you look at the ingredient list on bread, it's pretty scary. It's usually a pretty long list, if it's, if you can find a bread that's basically just flour, water, and maybe some butter, that's probably not so bad, but it's hard to find those things.
Is wheat a good item for you? I mean, natural wheat?
No, ultimately, I think for the most part, wheat is not a good item to have in your diet. Again, if you can find kind of what we call heritage wheat, which is, less processed, and, you can find very simple things like, occasionally I'll get some, or I'll make some homemade pasta, or, I have some few, restaurants around me that I know make like a clean homemade pasta that's literally just flour and water. And yeah, occasionally, I'll have some of that. But ultimately, the bottom of the food pyramid, 6 to 10 servings a day of whole grains that are supposed to be healthy for you are not healthy for you and are not supporting your metabolic health.
Just eat half a loaf of bread a day.
So if you have an EBT card, you're trying to spread the money the right way.
Yeah.
What would you do with that EBT card to pay for a balanced diet for yourself?
Yeah, and this is difficult because we have to realize that the incentives around our food system are such that, the highly processed food is inexpensive food. So if you're on a limited budget, you're going to be tempted to do that. I think the better thing to do would be to spend that money on, even inexpensive meat like ground beef, $1.99 a pound, and then fresh vegetables. And you don't have to get the organic vegetables necessarily. You get some fresh vegetables and you get some inexpensive meats. can be a good way to spend limited food dollars. One of the things that people don't really consider anymore are organ meats. Things like liver that used to be very common are not highly valued these days. Most people aren't looking to get that. So those are very inexpensive, and those turn out to be some of the most nutritionally dense foods we can consume. Liver is a superfood.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. It's interesting when you look at all the, you look at the charts of all the vitamins and minerals we're supposed to get, in a day. And people will look at that chart and, they're looking for their vitamin A and their vitamin B, and it will be in this vegetable or this vegetable. But when you look at liver, it has pretty much all of that in it.
Like any liver?
What?
Any liver?
Pretty much any liver, yeah. Beef liver is the most common that you can find, but, chicken liver and all these other livers, whatever's available to you, is a great way to, inexpensively get very nutritionally dense food. And those would be my suggestions.
Why is it that all the foods that are pleasurable to eat are no good for you, and the ones that
Grandpa's so
The first
sad.
thing you say,
He's
liver.
like, is bread a
Liver.
processed food? Can I eat wheat?
Yeah, so it turns out, and this is going to be, it's sort of shocking to hear, but it really shouldn't surprise anyone to know that the food industry is not interested in keeping you healthy.
They want you to die. They do.
You talk about it on this show so much, and it sounds conspiratorial that when we read in your book the corruption, it was just so
They don't
relieving
like you.
that an expert agrees.
They just want your money, and they want your stomach. They want
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. They just want you to eat more and to keep coming back for more. And they specifically engineer these foods. They're literally, they're called food scientists to study, what combination of ingredients is going to make you eat more. And that's their goal. And they do this in a couple of ways. So one of the problems with processed food is that the nutrients are stripped out of it. And, oftentimes they'll try to add them back in. It will say fortified with iron or fortified with vitamin D. But the reality is that the stuff they put back in to try and make it appear healthy, our bodies can't absorb those properly. They're not in the forms that our bodies can absorb. So it really ends up, you're eating a lot of food. You're not getting the nutrition that you need. Remember, I said your body does not sense calories. It senses nutrition. So when you eat something like liver that is dense with nutrients, all in a form that your body can absorb properly, you're not going to need to eat a lot of that to get, to feel full. And you're going to end up spending a lot less money because you're eating less amounts of these foods. When I eat, a largely carnivorous diet, mostly meat, I don't end up eating a lot of food because the food is so nutritionally dense. And that's, a big problem with our food supply. All of these processed foods are not nutritionally dense.
are you on the hit list of the food manufacturers?
I think I'm probably on some lists. And as I said, I'm hoping I hope that I get this message out to enough people that I end up on those hit lists, quite honestly. I want them
corn,
coming
big
after
dairy,
me.
do it. I dare you.
Yeah.
Big wheat, try it.
Yeah, exactly.
How is it even legal, or that it came to be that the people making the food pyramid are the same ones that are worrying about their stock margins with
Yeah.
They gave about 30% of that money to the people that made the FDA laws.
Yeah, that's it. And that's a very good question. So, when you look back at how we got to where we are, you have to realize that we made a fundamental error, at the beginning, and we haven't been able to
Capitalism.
We haven't been able to reconcile that error. So, we had a big problem in the 1950s, 1960s. Heart disease was going up. Obesity was starting to go up. And, rightly, the scientists at the time were worried about it. And there were two competing theories on why this was happening. And basically it came down to one group of scientists was saying that sugar, was the most damaging thing in our food environment. And the other camp was saying that fat, specifically saturated fat, was the most damaging thing in our food environment. And the camp that was professing that saturated fat was the bad thing in our food environment ended up winning out. Now, when we look back at the science that they did, the science that it was based on, it turns out that a lot of that was very poor quality science. And some of it, quite frankly, was just intentionally made up and misconstrued data.
Yeah.
But that camp won out, and we started down the pathway that we have to do everything we can to get saturated fat out of the diet. And if you get saturated fat out of food, you have to replace it with something. And they replaced it with sugar, essentially. That's what these processed foods do. And then they replaced it with fake oils, these processed vegetable and seed oils. And the evidence, again, is all around us. We've now been doing that for 50 plus years, and our health just continues to deteriorate. But now we've built this whole system around that, and it's just, it's not easy to untangle that, because it really starts at the beginning. When you look at the incentives that go to farmers as to what type of crops, what type of food they should produce, all of the incentives are around corn, soy, sugar, and these are the things that then end up in our food supply in large amounts. But ultimately, what I hope people realize, your audience and the people that read my book, what I hope they realize is that it's up to you to take control of your health.
Wow.
The system is not going to make you healthy. You have to take control. You have to be active in, assessing and improving your health if you want to remain healthy.
Doctor, things that I've read over the years kind of indicated that red meat is not good for you. And so I'm asking you about that. And also, you haven't really mentioned anything much about fish or seafood.
Yeah. So fish and seafood, I think, is very healthy for you. And I think most people would agree with that. I guess the vegans would quibble with that a little bit. But, otherwise, when you look at almost all the, diets that are put out there, the Mediterranean diet is heavy on seafood, and lots of other diets are heavy on seafood. So I think that's less controversial. The red meat issue is really, again, a product of poorly done science. So all of the studies that show red meat are bad for you are studies where someone, they ask people, what did you eat? And the person says, I ate a hamburger. And so that goes in the red meat category. They ate a hamburger. But the reality is when people eat a hamburger, it's the meat, and then it's the toppings, and then it's the bun. And typically it's going to be French fries, fried in vegetable and seed oils. And it's going to be a soda with it. And all of that, of course, goes into whether or not the person is healthy. But all the studies do is focus on they ate the meat, and that's what must be making them unhealthy. And we have to realize that, there's a large industry, that's starting to, that's growing all around us around meat substitute products, fake meats, the Impossible Burgers and the the plant-based meat substitutes. And now they're even talking about lab-grown meat and, how that is going to be more healthy for us. And again, from an evolutionary standpoint, for 99.9999% of our existence as humans, we have been eating red meat. And it's hard to believe that we evolved eating something that was unhealthy for us. And like I said, the science just doesn't support that. But it gets propagated because, there were business interests around making people believe that meat is bad for them.
Are you saying that saturated fats are not bad, or it's just not as bad as we've been led to believe?
Yeah, I do not think saturated fats are bad for our health, to be honest. And what most people don't realize is that in the last 2 revisions of the food guidelines, the U.S. dietary guidelines, they actually took out the caution around saturated fat. Their exact wording was something to their wording was something to the effect of saturated fat. There is not enough evidence that saturated fat should be a nutrient of concern. So I don't think saturated fat as part of a metabolically healthy diet is damaging. I do think that a high fat, highly processed, high carbohydrate diet is unhealthy for us. But it's not the fat that's the unhealthy part. It's the processed carbohydrates, the processed sugars, the vegetable and seed oils that go along with that. One of the very interesting, conundrums is that almost everyone says coconut oil is healthy for you, right? We've all heard that. Coconut oil is one of the healthiest fats you can consume. Coconut oil has a higher percentage of saturated fat than any animal product does. Coconut oil is 90% saturated fat. Most animal fats are, somewhere in the 40 to 50% range saturated fat. So if we believe saturated fat is bad for us, how can we believe that coconut oil is healthy for us?
Well, because it comes from a coconut, of course.
Right.
I was gonna say though, speaking of that, it's very vain of us as to me when I heard you talk about the argument between saturated fat and sugars. I personally think that it was like, oh man, no one wants to be fat. Let's go ahead and let's not vote for the fat. Let's not vote for the fat one. Let's go with the sugar. It's much easier for us to be like hyped up on sugar and still vainly looking nice in like stereotypical ways. I don't know if that went into the reason why lost, but I think that'd be sometimes a hard sell when someone sees that.
Yeah, it did sort of play into it because the concept that eating fat makes you fat, it is very simple. It makes a lot of sense, but it's simply not true. It turns out that, eating a lot of sugar is what makes us obese because sugar, carbohydrates in general, stimulate our bodies to make insulin. It's a hormone that we're all familiar with. And insulin signals the body to store fat. That's what it does. Again, there's lots of science to show this. If you go back as early as the late 1800s, we have papers published by physicians and scientists from the late 1800s that talk about the way to treat obesity is to eliminate sugar and carbohydrates from the diet. And you can see this going all the way throughout, the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s. And then there was a sudden change that all of a sudden fat was the problem and sugar wasn't the problem. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the sugar industry, funded, directly paid scientists to do studies that would implicate fat as being unhealthy so that they could get the attention off of the sugar. And they did such a good job of this that the tobacco industry then came along and they hired all those same PR people and scientists to, help, again, we, in the 60s and the 70s.
What were the plant people doing with their noses up going like, we're not going to take this advice? They should have took the same advice. They should have. They should.
Big Corn did, so.
Oh, okay. Good for them. That's crazy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it is crazy. But you look at how we got here, and it's kind of it is kind of scary to realize that this is how we got here. But like I said, what I come back to in the end is what that tells me. What I tell people is that you need to take control of your health. You cannot rely on the system to make you healthy anymore. And that is the sad reality. Hopefully over time, as more and more physicians, learn this and there is a growing community of physicians that are, understanding this and talking about it, we're going to be able to change the system ultimately. But for right now, it's up to each of us individually to change our system, to change things for ourselves and not be relying on the system to change it for us.
I'm a little confused, Doctor. Something like corn on the cob.
Yes.
That's high carbohydrates. It's high sugar. I guess it's got oil as well. Is that a good food for you or it's not?
Well, again, I think corn on the cob, by itself, if hopefully it doesn't have oils on it, and hopefully it was made with real butter instead of margarine on it. I think corn on the cob by itself, in limited amounts is going to be okay, especially for people who are metabolically healthy. But realize that if you are not metabolically healthy, you're right, corn is largely sugar. And our body doesn't differentiate. A carbohydrate breaks down to sugar, no matter what, the carbohydrate is. And our body doesn't really differentiate it. So if you're metabolically unhealthy, if you're not very active, if you don't have a lot of muscle tissue, you're not going to be able to tolerate a lot of carbohydrate in your diet, no matter what form it comes in.
This is something that I've really been wanting to touch on is if it was easy for everybody to just switch to chicken and broccoli, for example, everybody would do it, right? But there's a huge willpower aspect and a huge emotional aspect to everything we're talking about. You lost 100 pounds, you said publicly,
Yeah.
right? And on your journey towards becoming much healthier, how did you do it, and what do you recommend for? I don't know, like just the average part. Like it's really hard for me not to eat a whole pizza.
Yeah.
Show him the shelf, Brandon.
Should I?
Show him the shelf.
This is
I just
Show him.
this is what the sugar and drug this is what big pharma's done. Not big pharma, but the corn. You can't see how many boxes that is. It's like 9 boxes.
Yeah, it's not. So I just wanted to pull out because we were talking before you came on. I understand everything you're saying, and it's so difficult for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, and you as well, before you sort of made the switch, to get rid of the 9 boxes of $1 pasta and the $12 pizza that is just delicious. I mean, it tasted so good, Doc.
Did,
like
and
and it's so bad.
Yeah.
It's like
and I think ultimately what that comes down to is, sugar is addictive. We know this, Yes. We've all seen the study. It's always talked about how, sugar is more addictive than heroin. And
look at him.
We know sugar is addictive.
The dark room.
sugar addict.
Yeah,
over
and
here.
like anything else, you kind of need to, the first step is
Intervention. We're all here.
Is admitting you have the problem, and telling yourself, you want to overcome this, you want to be healthy, and you gotta, trade a little bit of short term, you got to sacrifice a little bit in the short term for your long-term goals of remaining healthy. So for me, it was the first thing I did was, basically cutting out sugar. My journey started with a journalist by the name of Gary Taubes, an author, Gary Taubes, and he wrote the book, The Case Against Sugar. And I heard him speak at a medical meeting, and I was, morbidly obese, and I was pre-diabetic, and I was very unhealthy. And I had tried, many times to lose the weight with the usual, calories in, calories out, like we were talking about before. And I would have short-term success and then ultimately fail. And I heard Gary talk, and I read his books, and I came to learn, about the hormonal influence of sugar and carbohydrates, the insulin and all of that. Not anything I had really learned in medical school. And so I cut out sugar, and you got to detox from sugar and carbohydrates for 30 days or so, 30 to 60 days. It's a little bit of, a struggle. And that's why it's important to find a physician or another healthcare practitioner that understands this to work with, because there are ways to do it that it becomes a little bit less of a struggle. But ultimately, you're detoxing from an addictive substance. What you come to realize once you get over that is that, whole real food can be very delicious. I love what I eat every day. I eat mostly meat products, seafood, eggs, dairy products, some vegetables, and I enjoy everything I eat. But what I've also come to realize is my life doesn't need to be centered around what I eat. And this is one of the other, kind of common problems in our society is we focus too much on what we eat because we're always hungry. Again, we're eating these processed foods that never really fulfill what our body is looking for. And when you start to eat whole, real food that's nutritionally dense and your body is getting the nutrition it needs, you just find that you're hungry less often and you're not so focused on food anymore. And then it becomes, a relatively easy habit to maintain. I have now maintained my weight loss of over 100 pounds for 5 years. And it is easier than all of those, times in the past that I was struggling through the counting my calories and, trying to burn off, excess calories with more exercise. That was a hard way to lose weight. This is an easy way to lose weight.
So you, sorry.
No. Mine is kind of off topic. I just been going down a rabbit hole of like, looking at, again, this makes me think about talking to patients. If I was a healthcare provider and helping the healthcare, it seems like everyone needs like everyone's addicted to something. They're all addicted to food. Majority of us, from our systems, system's fault, not us, not our own faults that are addicts. So they should be like some type of addiction advocate with the physician to give me a pamphlet of how I can stop eating Oreos. Right? Shouldn't it be like a thing that should happen?
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully my book can do that for people. That was my purpose behind writing the book, because obviously, I can only work with so many people directly. And, while there are a growing number of physicians that, I interact with and understand these issues and are out there, in practice as well, ultimately we can only each work with a limited number of people. And I hope that by getting this book out here, by getting this information out there, by, being on, as many podcasts as I can, I can help people in that way.
It's just really interesting. You touch on in the book that so many medical professionals are unhealthy, doctors especially. Yeah,
and I was one of them. Doctors are not immune from this. As I said, we don't learn the proper information around nutrition and health in medical school. So, in some ways, being a doctor worked against me. I had to unlearn a lot of this information to be able to, come to the conclusions that I have ultimately come to. And that's a challenge. It was hard for me to realize that, a lot of what I had learned in medical school and, a lot of what I spent doing the first part of my career doing was based on faulty information.
So have you not touched processed foods in 5 years?
I would say I have not touched processed foods in probably, close to 5 years. It's interesting. At first, I kind of learned about the sugar thing, but didn't really realize the full aspect of the processed food thing. The vegetable and seed oils was something I came to realize a little later on. But I really have not eaten, something out of a box in at least 3 years now, I would say.
Dang.
And so you would recommend a cold turkey approach as opposed to like a slice of pizza in moderation or a scoop of ice cream, right? Because it keeps the addiction going.
I think ultimately that was my experience, and that's the experience I had with a lot of people, is that, you can try and gradually cut down the amount. And for some people that does work. Some people just have the mindset and the, whatever it is, the willpower, whatever you want to call it, that they can truly say, okay, I'm only going to eat a little bit of this. But for most of us, I find that, eating it is kind of, keeping it in your system. And just as we don't tell alcoholics to just drink a little bit, I think we really need to be sort of cold turkeying this and just say, get the processed food out of your system and learn to eat the foods that are going to support your metabolic health.
Wow, we should get a chip system, Brandon, so I can get ourselves some chips.
Yeah. Add another one to my belt. Grandpa, are you gonna cut soda out of your diet now?
Well, I'm
what you know.
very much interested in everything that Phil is telling us. It certainly makes sense to me, and I can remember when I was a kid, and he ate healthy foods, brisket and carrots and whatever, and felt more filled up than you do today when you eat a lot of snacks and so forth. So, and I'm a big snack eater, and I really ought to stop. I'm in my early 80s, and it's having an effect on my stomach and whatever. So yeah, I definitely I appreciate all the information you're giving us.
I have two important questions.
Sure.
One, is popcorn a processed food?
I would say popcorn is a processed food.
Damn it!
You know how I don't fill you up. You eat the whole bucket, and you'd be like, "Where'd it go?"
Yeah, and then you're like, "Okay, I got to go make another bag," right?
Okay, look at your face.
So sad. I can't eat anything anymore.
What when you say vegetable and seed, are your olive oil and canola oil and all that stuff?
Yeah, so canola oil is a vegetable and is a processed oil. So canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, those are kind of the common ones. Olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil are the three. They're fruit oils. They're not actually, the seed. They don't take the same level of processing to make them as the other ones do. So those are all good. Again, the only caution I give people around that is a lot of the olive oil that we buy in this country is not real olive oil.
Yeah.
The cheap stuff that you get in the supermarket is usually cut with vegetable and seed oils, again, to increase the profit.
No way.
That looks like
There's no way.
that's not real.
And it won't say it on the bottle.
There's no way.
I see you looking,
No.
but unfortunately,
Wow.
again, the food laws are very, very much in favor of the food companies. And so you got to make sure you're getting good olive oil. And unfortunately, good olive oil is pricey.
That's just
but
Crisco
Not
with some food color
not
in it.
great
yeah,
value.
no, I don't think that's going to cut it, to be honest. So olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, all are good. Again, you look at the Mediterranean diet, you look at, vegan diets, all promote them. I think most people would agree. And then the animal fats. So butter, ghee, which comes from butter, lard and tallow, pork fat and beef fat, duck fat. These are, healthy fats to be consuming.
What do you cook your steaks in?
So, most steaks, you can just cook them because they have fat on them. But if I'm going to use a little something, I'll either use butter or I'll use tallow, beef fat, to cook them in.
Yeah.
Gotcha. It's so sad that you're literally out here like saving lives and like doing really, really important work, and then there's just major corporations that trying to make an extra buck and killing what it has to be like literally millions, right, over the years.
Oh yeah, I mean, 650,000 people die of heart disease every year. It is and has been the number one killer in this country for 30 plus years. And as big as COVID has been over the past year, realize that in 2020, COVID, got up to the number 2 or number 3 cause of death. It was very close with cancer, but it was less than half the number of people that died of heart disease last year.
And metabolic health and obesity, I've heard, has a lot to do with survival rate of COVID, right?
It does have a lot
for
to do with the survival rate of COVID. There are a lot of people, myself included, that believe that if we were more metabolically healthy, COVID would be a non-issue. Our bodies would better be able to fight off, this virus and other viruses if we were metabolically healthy. And again, the data shows, and this is one of the consistent data points that people can actually agree on around COVID. I know there's a lot of controversy around COVID, but one of the consistent things from the earliest data we had, coming out of China and Italy in those first waves, is that it is the obese and metabolically unhealthy people that are most susceptible to getting COVID and have the worst outcomes with COVID. And even when you look at now, the vaccines, the people who get vaccinated and still end up getting COVID, same thing. They're mostly, metabolically unhealthy. They're obese and they have all these comorbidities. So, and then, when you go down the top 10 causes of death in the United States every year, fairly consistent over the past 10 years, ignoring COVID for a minute, the top 10 causes of death, 7 of the 10 of them can be attributed to poor metabolic health.
Yeah. It sounds like, if I'm doing the math correct, like you're probably fighting like one of the big, like the hardest corporations. Like there's, trying to take the drugs off the street, and there's like, trying to stop addiction from all the drugs and stuff. But then you have something that like is kind of thrown down our, is thrown down our throat all day. Like if once I get off of here and get on YouTube, I bet I'll have like 3 or 4 commercials about some type of food that's processed, and then and it seems like you're at an uphill battle. My question systematically, like, do you have any like, besides I guess education is your big tool. Are you gonna run for politics or anything, or
I never rule anything out at this point. I didn't think 5 years ago that this is what I'd be doing today. And people have brought that up to me. And I've certainly thought about it because we really do need to change it at that level. We need to get people to understand, the politicians to understand, what a major problem this is. But like I said, it's going to be, the system isn't going to change quickly. Hopefully over time we can start making those changes and enough voices get out there, the physicians and the patients working together, to demand that this starts to change. I think it's going to have to be a grassroots, ground up movement to really start making that change. And I think it starts with each and every one of us individually saying, we want to be healthy. We want to take back our health from the food companies, from the pharmaceutical companies, and we are going to do what it takes to do that. And if enough of us do that, we can start to make an impact on the system.
A follow-up question, to even do what you're doing takes a lot of strength and courage to be able to fight the system that you're in, and usually have a team around you that are able to like help and give you support. Were there anybody in your life besides, I know you were a big example, but how'd you get here to have enough galls to be able to write a book like this?
Yeah, there have certainly been other physicians who have influenced me. I mentioned Gary Taubes,
right,
the author that wrote that book originally. He's been a big influence. There are other authors, other journalists out there. People like Nina Teicholz is one that comes to mind. And then there are the other physicians who have, kind of led the way, and I was able to learn from. Realize that there are physicians who have had their medical license threatened or even taken away because they talk about these issues. There's a surgeon by the name of Gary Fettke. There's a physician by the name of Tim Noakes. They were both overseas or in South Africa and Tasmania, Australia. But they had to go through a literally court proceedings to defend their medical licenses against the accusations that they were spreading, misinformation and harming patients. And they were both ultimately, found not guilty. They were cleared of all the charges. But this is a real threat. And, especially in the environment we're in today, talking about things that aren't supported by the mainstream can be dangerous. But I couldn't live with myself as a physician or as a person not getting this information out there, knowing this information and not using it to better the health of my patients and better the health of the people around me is not an option for me.
Wow. This is a side personal question about food. Coffee and tea that I buy from the store,
Yeah.
What of it is not processed? And like just going off of, say I was drink it without any artificial anything, no honey, no, just plain tea bag or plain coffee from a Keurig. What's clean and what's not? What is there?
Yeah, I think that I don't have any problems with that. I think the beverages that we should be drinking, for the most part, are water, coffee, and tea. And I'll be honest with you, there are some people who think coffee, might not be healthy for us. There's some concern about, a lot of the coffee has mold toxins in it and this and that. I don't get too hung up on that. Ultimately, is coffee necessary for your health? No. Water is really the only beverage that's necessary for our health. But, I don't think coffee is harmful. I don't think tea is harmful. I prefer, people drink their coffee without, like you said, sweeteners in it, black, or, if you want to put a little bit of heavy cream is what I actually tell people to put in it, or whole milk. Again, skim milk is a processed food. We should be, drinking milk when we drink it, as close as we can to how it comes out of as it comes out of the cow. Yep. Or the goat or the sheep, both also good, like I said, I don't have any issues with coffee or tea.
Do you put sea salt in your coffee?
I do put salt in my coffee. So
I think,
what does it do?
So I think getting electrolytes, one of the other problems with our food supply is salt has been demonized. And again, salt seems to be associated with poor health because most of the salt that Americans consume is in processed food. So salt sort of got caught up in the as a food that as something that was not good for our health. But real salt, and I prefer sea salt that hasn't had all the minerals stripped out of it. Again, a lot of the table salt is another processed food, but real sea salt I think is great, and I think it's something to incorporate in your diet. And so I started adding it to my coffee in the morning, and I've come to enjoy that very much. And you think about one of the popular flavors at Starbucks in those places is the salted caramel thing. So skip the caramel, just put the salt in there. And give it a try. I think a lot of people will be surprised.
I'll be back next Wednesday with my results.
I'll try it. I have sea salt and I do drink coffee a lot. But, oh, man.
You have not found in the studies that higher levels of sodium consumption have to do with worse heart health?
No. Again, the studies that show that are largely looking at salt as a component of processed food. There really is not evidence that salt in and of itself is damaging to our health.
This is mind blowing, Doc. It goes against. It's just nice hearing it from an actual expert. There's such a fad dieting and fad advice, and it's people trying to make money with very limited knowledge.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, one of the things I talk about in the book is, the whole dieting mentality, the whole dieting mindset is not serving us well. We should be looking at the bigger picture. We should be eating and living our lives in a way that is going to support our health. We shouldn't necessarily be worried about sort of the short-term goals. I need to lose 10 pounds. I need to lose 15 pounds, whatever it is. When you get yourself healthy, when you pay attention to metabolic health, losing weight for those of us that need to lose it is going to be a side effect, but it shouldn't really be your primary focus. I think the primary focus should be on metabolic health.
You also talked about people that are thin, so not necessarily looking overweight, but very metabolically unhealthy,
right?
Or inner fat. I think you called it.
Yeah. So
the term in the book.
Yeah, the medical term for it is we kind of refer to it as TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So visceral fat, which is the fat that's around the organs, in our abdomens largely, is kind of the hallmark of poor metabolic health. The more visceral fat you have, the more metabolically unhealthy you are. And so people can be thin on the outside, but have all this fat kind of building up on the inside that isn't really that apparent. And again, the data shows, remember I said 88% of adults in the United States are not metabolically healthy. Lean people, so people who are normal body weight or even, under what is considered normal body weight, 40% of those people are not metabolically healthy. So yes, being obese makes you more likely to be metabolically unhealthy. And the vast majority of obese people are metabolically unhealthy. But being lean doesn't no way guarantees that you're metabolically healthy. And you gotta look at these measures to know if you're metabolically healthy or not.
I'm maybe asking a question that may be a little bit out of Grandpa. Do you have a question? I'm sorry.
No. I was going to run to the kitchen to try to get rid of all the snacks,
Go-
eat them all
go
up,
clean
and
it all out.
start this-
Get rid of all them.
Yeah, eat
Get rid of all
them and
those-
then throw
yeah.
the wrappers.
Now this might be a little bit out of your real house, but I'll ask this because it's a big topic to me
Sure.
too. But like the planet Earth, keeping it going around and as safe, like is by focusing on your diet or not diet. I'm sorry, focusing on your habit, this metabolic lifestyle, or giving it more. Will that help the Earth anymore?
Ultimately, I think it will. So again, ruminant animals used to be a lot more prominent on this Earth, and the climate changes that we're worried about are only a recent phenomena. And you got to realize that all this processed food is being flown all over the world, shipped all over the world, made in one place, shipped to another. There's a lot that goes into the food processing, and ruminant animals, cows, bison, deer, all of these animals are really a net positive to the environment. Again, they've been villainized, but when you really look at it, the good science shows that ruminant animals are a net positive to the environment. The sort of monocropping, as it's called, that goes into growing the large amounts of corn and soy and all this that go into the processed food is damaging to the soil. It has been shown that the good soil layer covering the United States, covering the Earth, has been deteriorated over the years, and that is not helping the environment any. So I actually think that eating whole real food is the most environmentally friendly way to eat.
Great.
Well, this has been a pleasure, guys. I have another podcast to hop on to in a few minutes, but thank you for having me on.
Before you go,
Yep.
Can you do all of the socials, all of the plugs,
Sure.
everything like that for our audience?
So the book is called Stay Off My Operating Table. It comes out November 11th. It's going to be, it's up for pre-sale right now on Amazon in the Kindle format only. The hardcover, softcover, audiobook versions are going to be up soon for pre-sale, Amazon and all the other, major online booksellers. Social media wise, on Twitter, I'm at iFixHearts. That's where I'm most active. I'm also on Instagram at Ovadia_heart_health. And then if you go to ifixhearts.co, it's going to take you to my metabolic health assessment tool. You can sign up to join my newsletter, and you can also book a call with me to see if if you're interested in joining my practice as a patient. You can book a discovery call with me to see if that would be a good option for you.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
And my last question: how did you find our show?
That's a very good question, actually. I was really looking to get out to as wide an audience as possible. One of the, my editor working with the book, I think ran the top, kind of health and wellness and lifestyle shows, and your show came up, and I was happy to connect with you guys. So you're doing great work. You're reaching an audience, and please keep it up.
You're a great guest. I really
So
enjoyed
good.
this
Thank you.
Dr.
program.
Ovadia.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well.
And I love the book. I think a lot of people will, and you're literally out here saving lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Watch your back for those people that are coming after you.
Big weed breathing down your neck.
Will do. Yeah. Hopefully I have the right people around me and protecting me.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Very good. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Have a good night. See ya.
Thank you.
Podcasting with Grandpa Bart and Rosie, always on his shoulder. This is Grandpa and Chill.
Grandpa and Chill is brought to you by your hosts, Brandon Fox, Bart Frank, and Phines Jackson. Our producer is Sierra Doss. You can find episodes old and new on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch the show, and follow us on Twitter for behind-the-scenes moments you can't get anywhere else.